rhythmic beeping of the life support machine echoed through the cold hospital room. James gripped his little daughter's motionless hand, his throat constricting as he stared at the $78,000 bill. "I'm sorry, Emma," he whispered, tears rolling down his hollow cheeks. Just then, the door swung open. Victoria Reynolds, CEO of the tech company that had rejected him last week, stepped in. Her eyes landed on the crayon drawing taped to the wall. "Daddy, I love you. Emma will be okay." What would you do if you were in Victoria's shoes? Would you walk away or stay to help a desperate father and his sick child? James Wilson hadn't always been a barista at the small coffee shop in downtown Boston. 3 years ago, he was a promising software engineer at a Cambridge tech firm with a bright future ahead of him. His world revolved around two things: his career and his daughter Emma. But when Emma was diagnosed with a rare congenital heart condition at age 5, everything changed. The medical bills piled up, and his frequent absences to care for his daughter strained his professional relationships. Despite his technical brilliance, James was eventually let go when he couldn't commit to the demanding schedule his position required. The day Sarah left them was etched in his memory. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and Emma was having one of her bad episodes. James had just gotten off the phone with the hospital billing department, trying to negotiate a payment plan for the mounting medical expenses. Sarah stood in the doorway of their once happy home, suitcases packed. "I can't do this anymore, James," she had said, her voice devoid of emotion. "This isn't the life I signed up for." "She's your daughter too," James had pleaded, his voice breaking as Emma slept fitfully in the next room. "I know, and I'll always love her. But I'm not strong like you. I can't watch her suffer day after day, not knowing if—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I need to find myself again." With that, Sarah walked out of their lives, occasionally sending birthday cards and Christmas gifts but never visiting, never calling to check on Emma's condition. James later learned she had moved to New Hampshire with a wealthy real estate developer named Robert, starting the carefree life she had always wanted. After losing his job, James had to downsize from their modest apartment in Cambridge to a tiny one-bedroom place in Dorchester. He sold his car, his prized guitar collection, and even his wedding ring to keep up with Emma's medical expenses. He took a job as a barista at the bean counter, working odd hours that allowed him to take Emma to her appointments at Boston Children's Hospital. On weekends, he picked up delivery gigs for DoorDash, often with Emma accompanying him, singing along to the radio from the back seat of his borrowed car. Despite their struggles, Emma remained remarkably resilient. At 8 years old, she possessed wisdom far beyond her years. While other children her age complained about homework or fought over toys, Emma worried about her father working too hard. She pretended not to notice when he skipped meals so she could eat, or when he wore the same worn-out shoes season after season. Emma's artistic talent was her escape from the reality of hospital rooms and medication schedules. She filled sketchbooks with colorful drawings, slush forests, magical creatures, and most frequently, family portraits. In these drawings, there was always James, depicted as a superhero with a cape, and a shadowy figure with a halo that Emma explained was Mom in heaven. Even though Sarah wasn't dead, James never corrected her. Perhaps it was easier for Emma to imagine her mother as an angel watching over her than as someone who had chosen to leave. Victoria Reynolds had built her reputation as the youngest female CEO in Boston's competitive tech industry. At 32, she led Innovate Tech with the precision and determination that had become her trademark. The daughter of wealthy Connecticut parents, Victoria had been groomed for success from an early age. She graduated from MIT at 22, launched her first startup at 24, and by 30 had orchestrated a merger that catapulted her into the executive suite. Behind the polished exterior and power suits, however, Victoria carried a profound loneliness. Her engagement to her business partner had ended abruptly when she discovered he was only interested in her family's connections. After that betrayal, Victoria threw herself into work, building walls so high that no one could scale them. Her spacious penthouse apartment overlooking the Charles River was immaculate and impersonal, more like a hotel suite than a home. What few people knew was that Victoria's drive was fueled by a childhood tragedy. When she was 10, her younger sister, Jessica, died from a heart condition similar to Emma's. Victoria had watched helplessly as her once vibrant sister faded away, despite the best medical care money could buy. Her parents, devastated by the loss, had retreated into their grief, leaving Victoria to navigate her pain alone. She had promised herself then that she would make something of her life for both of them. The day James came to Innovate Tech for his interview, Victoria had been immediately impressed by his technical knowledge and innovative thinking. His resume showed exactly the kind of talent they needed. But when the conversation turned to overtime expectations and weekend availability, James had hesitated. "I'm a single father," he had explained. "My daughter has a medical condition that requires frequent hospital visits. I can be flexible, but she has to be my priority." The hiring committee had exchanged glances. Victoria, bound by corporate policy and pressure from the board to maintain their intense work culture, had reluctantly decided against hiring him. She had watched the hope drain from his eyes as she delivered the news, feeling a twinge of guilt she couldn't quite suppress. A week later, Victoria was leaving the office late when she spotted James in the lobby. He was checking his phone, his face crumpling in panic. She overheard fragments of his conversation. "Collapsed. Emergency. On my way," before he bolted toward the exit. Something in his desperate expression triggered a memory of her father rushing her sister to the hospital years ago. Without thinking, Victoria followed him. At Boston Children's Hospital, she kept a discreet distance as James spoke with Dr. Miller. Their voices carried in the quiet corridor. "Her condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated," the doctor said. "The medication isn't working as effectively anymore. We need to consider surgery sooner rather than later." "How much?" James asked, his voice barely audible. When Dr. Miller mentioned the figure, Victoria saw James sway slightly, as if physically struck. Yet his next words were steady. "I'll find a way. I always do." As James entered Emma's room, Victoria lingered in the hallway, uncertain why she felt so compelled to stay. Through the partially open door, she watched as he approached the small figure on the bed. Emma's face lit up, despite her obvious weakness, and she reached for her father with complete trust. It was the same expression Jessica had worn whenever their parents entered her hospital room: pure, unconditional love. Victoria slipped away, but she couldn't forget what she had witnessed. The next day, she returned to the hospital with a flimsy excuse about reconsidering James for a position. She found him dozing in an uncomfortable chair beside Emma's bed, dark circles under his eyes, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Emma was the first to notice her. "Are you Daddy's boss?" the little girl asked curiously. James startled awake, confusion and wariness crossing his face as he recognized Victoria. "Not exactly," Victoria said, suddenly feeling foolish. "I'm just following up on something." "Are you an angel?" Emma persisted. "You're pretty like one." Victoria laughed, tension breaking. "Definitely not an angel, just someone who wanted to check if you both were okay." That first awkward visit turned into a second, then a third. Victoria brought Italian food from Giacomo's, James's favorite restaurant, though he rarely indulged due to cost. She arrived with books and art supplies for Emma from FAO Schwartz. Small kindnesses that she justified to herself as simple human decency. When James mentioned his struggle to find flexible employment, Victoria arranged for a remote contract position at Innovate Tech that allowed him to work from the hospital. She told herself it was good business. James was talented, and the company needed his skills. If the arrangement bent several corporate policies, well, that was her prerogative as CEO. Emma quickly warmed to Victoria, dubbing her the lady with the magic bag for her habit of always bringing some small treasure. During one visit, Victoria found Emma attempting to draw a butterfly she'd seen outside her window. "I can't get the wings right," Emma sighed in frustration. "I'm not much of an artist," Victoria admitted, "but my sister used to say that butterflies are just flying hearts with extra pieces." Emma's eyes widened. "You had a sister? Where is she now?" Victoria rarely spoke of Jessica, but something about Emma's direct gaze made her answer honestly. "She went to heaven when she was about your age. She had a special heart, like yours." Emma nodded solemnly. "Was she scared?" "Sometimes," Victoria said softly. "But she was also very brave." I get scared too, Emma confessed. Not of dying, but of Daddy being alone. He needs somebody to remind him to eat lunch and to smile more. The child's perceptiveness caught Victoria off guard. From that day, a special bond formed between them. Emma taught Victoria how to sketch simple animals and flowers, while Victoria showed Emma how to play simple melodies on the small keyboard she brought to the hospital. James would often return from getting coffee to find them laughing together, heads bent over some project. As weeks passed, the boundaries of their unusual relationship blurred. Victoria found herself canceling business dinners to join James and Emma for movie nights in the hospital room. James, who had been guarded and proud at first, gradually shared stories of his childhood in rural Massachusetts, his dreams of starting his own tech company someday, and his struggle to be both mother and father to Emma. During one such evening, after Emma had fallen asleep, James turned to Victoria with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Why are you doing all this?" he asked quietly. "Not that I'm not grateful, but people like you don't usually bother with people like us." Victoria looked at Emma's peaceful face, trying to formulate an answer that wouldn't sound condescending or reveal too much. "People like me aren't as different as you think," she finally said. "And maybe I needed this as much as you did." "Needed what?" "To remember what matters," Victoria replied. "Before Emma, I hadn't drawn anything since Jessica died. I'd forgotten how it felt to create something just for joy." James studied her face for a long moment. "Emma has that effect on people. She makes you see the world differently." The moment was interrupted by a nurse coming to check Emma's vitals, but something had shifted between them. A mutual recognition of two broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's company. One rainy afternoon, Victoria arrived at the hospital to find Emma alone, a nurse supervising from the doorway. "Daddy had to go sign some papers," Emma explained, patting the bed beside her. "Will you stay until he comes back? I made something for you." She handed Victoria a drawing of 3 figures holding hands in front of a house: a tall man, a little girl, and a woman with long hair. Above them, she had written in careful letters, "My family." Victoria's throat tightened as she traced the crayon lines. "It's beautiful, Emma." "Do you think it could be real someday?" Emma asked hopefully. Before Victoria could answer, James returned, his expression unreadable as he took in the scene. Emma eagerly showed him the drawing, oblivious to the adult's discomfort. "That's very nice, sweetheart," he said, avoiding Victoria's eyes. "Why don't you show Nurse Nancy while I talk to Ms. Reynolds for a minute?" Once Emma was out of earshot, James turned to Victoria. "I don't want her getting the wrong idea about us, about what this is." "And what is this, exactly?" Victoria asked, feeling strangely defensive. James ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know, but Emma's been through enough disappointment. I can't have her thinking we're going to be some happy family when I'm just the rich lady playing charity case," Victoria finished, the words sharper than intended. "That's not what I meant," James said. "But let's be realistic. Our worlds are completely different. Eventually you'll go back to your real life and we'll go back to ours." Victoria wanted to argue but found she couldn't. Wasn't that exactly what had happened with every other personal connection she'd tried to make? Eventually, work called her back. Priorities shifted, relationships faded. Why would this be any different? "You're right," she said finally. "I should be more careful about the expectations I'm setting." The conversation left a lingering awkwardness between them, but they maintained their routine for Emma's sake. Victoria continued her visits, bringing work with her more often, maintaining a slightly more professional distance. James was unfailingly polite but guarded, as if rebuilding the walls that had begun to come down. Emma, perceptive as always, noticed the change. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" she asked Victoria one afternoon, while James was speaking with Dr. Miller. "No, sweetie," Victoria assured her. "Grown-ups just have complicated feelings sometimes." Emma considered this. "Daddy smiles with his eyes when you're here, even when his mouth isn't smiling." Victoria didn't know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject, suggesting they work on a new drawing. But Emma's words lingered in her mind, making her wonder if she was imagining the connection she felt with James, or if there was something real between them that both were too afraid to acknowledge. The fragile balance they had established shattered 3 weeks later. James had been reviewing Emma's upcoming treatment plan with Dr. Miller when he noticed a notation about a specialized surgical procedure, one performed by a cardiac specialist from Mayo Clinic, a procedure that hadn't been discussed with him. Confused, James questioned the doctor, who explained that arrangements had been made for Dr. Tim Anderson, one of the country's leading pediatric cardiac surgeons, to perform Emma's operation. When James pressed for details about the cost, Dr. Miller looked uncomfortable. "It's been taken care of," he said. "A private donor has covered all expenses." James felt his stomach drop. "What private donor?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but they've also established a fund for Emma's post-separative care and future medical needs." It didn't take much detective work for James to piece together what had happened. When Victoria arrived that evening, he was waiting in the hallway outside Emma's room, his expression thunderous. "Emma's resting," he said curtly. "I need to talk to you privately." In the small hospital garden, James confronted Victoria with the emails he'd found. Messages between her and the hospital administration, arranging not only for Emma's surgery, but for a comprehensive care plan extending years into the future. The amount involved was staggering, representing more money than James would earn in a decade. "Where are you ever going to tell me?" he demanded, voice shaking with controlled anger. Victoria's composure faltered. "I was waiting for the right time. I wanted to help James. Emma deserves the best care possible. And I can't provide that, is that it?" James's voice rose despite his efforts to stay calm. "You thought you'd swoop in with your millions and fix everything." "That's not fair," Victoria protested. "I never meant to undermine you." "Then what did you mean to do? Ease your conscience about not hiring me? Play savior to the poor single dad and his sick kid?" James's words were bitter. "We're not a charity case, Victoria. We're not some project you can throw money at to feel better about yourself." Victoria felt as if she'd been slapped. "Is that what you think this is? That I've been spending time with you and Emma out of pity?" "I don't know what to think anymore," James said, his anger giving way to weariness. "But I do know. I can't accept this. I've managed on my own for 3 years. I don't need to be rescued." "This isn't about rescuing you," Victoria insisted. "It's about Emma, about giving her the best chance. And I'm supposed to swallow my pride and be grateful, right?" James laughed humorlessly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to not be able to provide for your child? To know that no matter how hard you work, it's never enough?" Victoria started to respond, then stopped. No, she didn't know. She'd never faced that kind of struggle, that sense of inadequacy. Her silence seemed to confirm something for James. "That's what I thought," he said quietly. "Thank you for your generosity, Miss Reynolds, but we'll find another way." "James, please. I think it's better if you don't visit anymore," he cut her off. "Emma's already too attached. It'll only hurt her more when you eventually move on to your next good deed." Victoria felt tears threatening, but held them back. "At least let me say goodbye to her." James hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Tomorrow. She's sleeping now and she needs her rest." But Victoria never got to say goodbye. When she arrived the next day, Emma's room was empty. A nurse informed her that James had checked Emma out against medical advice, leaving only a note asking that his privacy be respected. Victoria tried calling, but James had changed his number. She went to his apartment in Dorchester, only to learn from a neighbor that they had moved out overnight. Even at the bean counter, no one knew where James had gone. It was as if he and Emma had vanished. For weeks, Victoria threw herself into work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. She told herself it was for the best. James was right about their different worlds, about the impossibility of whatever had been growing between them. Still, she found herself looking for Emma's smile in every child she passed, hearing James's laugh in crowded rooms. The corporate apartment she once found so perfectly adequate now felt sterile and empty. The drawings Emma had given her, carefully preserved in protective sleeves, were the only spots of color in her monochrome existence. Victoria had never considered herself sentimental, but she couldn't bring herself to put them away. 3 months after James and Emma disappeared, Victoria was preparing for a business trip when her assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Sarah Wilson had filed for full custody of Emma, claiming James was unable to provide adequate care for a child with serious medical needs. The case was scheduled for a hearing in Suffolk County Family Court the following week. Victoria canceled her trip and contacted the best family law attorney in Boston. Though James had rejected her help, she couldn't stand by while Emma was potentially taken from the father who had sacrificed everything for her. Using her connections, Victoria obtained the court documents and was disturbed by what she found. Sarah claimed James had become unstable and financially destitute, pointing to his sudden departure from Boston as evidence. She and her new husband Robert could offer Emma a stable home with comprehensive medical care covered by Robert's premium insurance. On paper, it seemed like a compelling argument, especially when compared to James's current situation, working odd jobs in a small town in western Massachusetts, living in a rented room above a hardware store. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was tense. Sarah sat confidently beside her expensive attorney, while James looked exhausted and out of place in his only suit. Emma was not present, having been deemed too fragile to attend. Sarah's lawyer painted a damning picture of James as a well-meaning but incapable father, emphasizing his financial struggles and Emma's deteriorating condition. James's public defender seemed overwhelmed, fumbling through his notes as the judge looked increasingly convinced by the opposition's arguments. When it was James's turn to speak, he rose slowly, his voice steady despite his obvious fatigue. "Your Honor, I'm not a perfect father. I can't give Emma everything she deserves. But I've never once left her side during a hospital stay. I've never missed a doctor's appointment. I've held her through every painful procedure and frightening night." His voice cracked slightly. Sarah walked away when things got hard. "She's seen our daughter exactly twice in 3 years. I just ask that you consider what Emma needs most. Money and stability, yes, but also love and consistency." The judge seemed moved, but still concerned about the practical aspects of Emma's care. "Mr. Wilson, your devotion is clear, but this court must consider the child's medical needs above all else. How do you plan to finance the surgery Dr. Miller has recommended?" Before James could answer, the courtroom doors opened. Victoria walked in, followed by Dr. Miller and Nurse Nancy from Boston Children's Hospital. The judge, recognizing Victoria from recent business news, raised an eyebrow. "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney addressed the court, "we request permission for these witnesses to speak on Mr. Wilson's behalf." What followed was a powerful testament to James's character and dedication. Dr. Miller described how James had learned complex medical procedures to care for Emma at home, reducing her hospital stays. Nurse Nancy recounted nights when James had worked remotely from Emma's bedside, never leaving her alone, and most surprisingly, they presented a letter from Emma herself, smuggled out by Nancy during a recent checkup. "My daddy is my hero," the nurse read aloud. "When I'm scared, he holds my hand and tells me stories until I'm brave again. He never lets me see him cry, but sometimes I hear him at night when he thinks I'm asleep. Please don't take me away from him. He needs me as much as I need him." The courtroom fell silent. Sarah's confident expression faltered, and her attorney shifted, uncomfortably. Finally, Victoria stepped forward. "Your Honor, I'd like to speak, not as the CEO of Innovate Tech, but as someone who has witnessed James and Emma's extraordinary bond firsthand." The judge nodded permission, and Victoria took a deep breath. 3 years ago, I lost my sister to a heart condition similar to Emma's. She was in the care of the best doctors money could buy. But what she needed most in her final days wasn't medical expertise. It was the unwavering presence of someone who loved her completely. Victoria's voice remained steady, though her eyes shimmered. "I've seen how James puts Emma's needs above everything, his pride, his comfort, even his dignity. When I offered financial assistance, he refused, because he didn't want Emma to think he couldn't provide for her himself." Victoria turned slightly to face Sarah. "Being a parent isn't about giving a child the biggest house or the most expensive clothes. It's about being there, day after day, through the hardest moments. By that measure, James Wilson is the finest parent I've ever known." She then revealed that she had established a blind trust for Emma's medical care, one that James couldn't refuse because it was in Emma's name, managed by an independent trustee with no conditions attached. Emma will have access to the best medical care regardless of today's decision. The only question is whether she'll receive that care with the father who has never left her side, or with someone who has chosen to re-enter her life only now. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Sarah leaned over to her attorney, their heated discussion barely contained. James stared at Victoria in shock, clearly seeing her for the first time since she'd entered. Whereas the jury is most faithful to the truth, our best earnest and unconditional prayer revealed. Before the judge could respond, Sarah suddenly stood. Your Honor, I'd like to withdraw my petition for custody. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Sarah's eyes were wet as she continued. Listening to these testimonials has made me realize I left because I couldn't handle Emma's illness. James stayed. He's been the parent I couldn't be. She looked at her ex-husband. I'm sorry, James. I thought I was doing what was best for Emma, but maybe I was just trying to ease my own guilt. The judge studied Sarah for a moment, then nodded. Petition withdrawn. Full custody remains with Mr. Wilson. He banged his gavel, ending the proceedings. As people filed out of the courtroom, James stood frozen, processing what had just happened. Victoria hesitated, unsure of her welcome, after everything that had transpired. But then, a small voice called out from the doorway. Victoria? Emma broke free from Nurse Nancy's grasp and ran across the courtroom, her slight figure moving with more energy than Victoria had ever seen. James made a startled sound as his daughter threw herself into Victoria's arms. You came back, Emma said, her face glowing. I knew you would. Victoria knelt to Emma's level, brushing a strand of hair from the child's face. I never really left, sweetheart. I was just giving you and your dad some space. Did you get my drawings? I asked Nurse Nancy to mail them to you. I did, Victoria smiled. They're hanging in my office now. James approached slowly, his expression a complex mixture of gratitude, embarrassment, and something deeper that Victoria couldn't quite name. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. After how I treated you? Yes, I did, Victoria interrupted. Not because you needed saving, but because, she glanced at Emma, then back to James, because you both showed me what family really means, something I hadn't experienced since Jessica died. Emma looked between the adults, her keen perception catching the current of unspoken emotions. Does this mean we can be friends again? James met Victoria's gaze, a small smile finally breaking through his guarded expression. I think we can do better than that. If Victoria's willing to forgive a stubborn, prideful man who didn't know how to accept help gracefully, I might be persuaded, Victoria replied, her own smile growing. On one condition. What's that? You let me take you both to lunch. I know a place that makes the best grilled cheese in Boston, and someone promised to teach me how to draw proper butterflies. Emma beamed, taking each of their hands in hers. Can we go right now? I'm starving. For the first time in months, James laughed freely. I think that can be arranged. 1 year later, the scene at Boston Public Garden was picture perfect. A crisp autumn day with golden leaves drifting onto the pathways. Emma, her color improved and energy restored after her successful surgery, chased a flock of ducks near the pond, while James and Victoria watched from a nearby bench. Dr. Anderson says her latest tests are encouraging, James said, his shoulder brushing against Victoria's. She might not need another procedure for years, if at all. That's wonderful, Victoria replied, watching Emma's antics with a fond smile. She's getting so strong. In the months following the custody hearing, they had rebuilt their relationship carefully, mindful of past mistakes. Victoria had stepped back from the CEO position at Innovate Tech, taking on an advisory role that allowed her more personal time. She'd used part of her substantial savings to establish Hope Gallery in South Boston, a community art center for children facing medical and economic challenges. Emma was their unofficial mascot, her story inspiring other families navigating similar struggles. James had accepted a position with a smaller tech firm that valued his talent enough to offer true flexibility. They had relocated to Beacon Hill, to a modest but comfortable apartment within walking distance of Emma's school. Victoria had surprised them by purchasing the adjacent townhouse, claiming it was a smart real estate investment, though they all knew her true motivation. Their relationship had evolved into something neither could have predicted. Not quite a traditional family, but something uniquely their own. They shared meals several times a week, attended Emma's school events together, and spent weekends exploring Boston's museums and parks as a unit. Victoria had her own key to James's place, and James could often be found helping with projects at Hope Gallery late into the evening. Yet they had never defined exactly what they were to each other. Friends, certainly. Co-parents to Emma in many practical ways. But the deeper feelings that sometimes surfaced in lingering glances or accidental touches remained unspoken, as if both were afraid to disrupt the delicate balance they had achieved. Emma, of course, had her own ideas. She had taken to introducing Victoria as my bonus mom to new friends, and her artwork increasingly featured the three of them engaged in family activities. When asked directly about Victoria's role, Emma would simply say, "She belongs with us," with the unshakable conviction of a child who sees clearly what adults often complicate. As they sat watching Emma feed the ducks, James reached into his pocket, then hesitated. "Something wrong?" Victoria asked. "Not wrong exactly," he said. "Just thinking about how much has changed in a year." Victoria nodded. "Emma's health, your job, my complete lifestyle overhaul." She smiled. "All good changes, though." "Very good," James agreed. "But there's one change I've been considering that I'm not sure about." Victoria's heart skipped slightly. "Oh?" James pulled a small box from his pocket, turning it over in his hands rather than opening it. "I've had this for a while now. I keep waiting for the perfect moment, but then I wonder if I'm misreading everything." Victoria's breath caught as she recognized the distinctive shape of the box. "James, I'm not asking for an answer right now," he said quickly. "Just think about it, about us, whatever us means. Because Emma wasn't wrong when she drew that picture of a family. It's what we've become, isn't it? In our own way." Before Victoria could respond, Emma bounded up to them, cheeks flushed with exertion and joy. "Can we get hot chocolate? The cart man says they have cinnamon ones today." James tucked the box back into his pocket with a rueful smile. "Perfect timing as always, kiddo. Sure, hot chocolate sounds great." Later that evening, they celebrated Emma's birthday with a small gathering at James's apartment. As Emma blew out her candles, her eyes squeezed shut in concentration, both adults watched her with identical expressions of love. "What did you wish for?" they asked in unison when she opened her eyes. Emma's smile turned mysterious. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true. But I think you both already know." Her gaze darted meaningfully to James's pocket, where the outline of the box was just visible, then to Victoria's hand resting on the table. For a moment, James and Victoria's eyes met over the flickering candles, a smile passing between them as Emma whispered, "Sometimes what we're looking for is right in front of us, if we're brave enough to see it." Victoria's hand moved slightly closer to James's on the table, his fingers stretched toward hers, their fingertips just touching. A small gesture, but filled with promise. Outside the window, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, as inside, three people who had found each other against all odds celebrated not just a birthday, but the family they had created together. Undefined, unconventional, but undeniably real. If this healing journey touched your heart, please like this video, share this story, and subscribe to our channel to restore your faith in humanity and family bonds. What do you think should happen next? Should James and Victoria open their hearts to each other, or remain special friends forever?